from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the program, live and national, and I'm hoping that I'll get to chat with you guys a little bit. You know the phone number, it's 833-505-4626. That's our legacy line, a little curveball for you. Or the regular line, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to get into a bunch of stuff. But first, I want to ask you a question. Are you tired of winning yet? Or should I say that in my El Trompito voice? Are you tired of winning yet? We're going to do so much winning, you're going to be tired of winning. I am not tired of winning, Mr. President. Keep it coming, sir. Keep your foot on the gas. I absolutely love it. But listen, we paused on Friday night, and with the potential for a trade war with Canada, with Mexico, and Panama and the Panama Canal were up in the air. Over the weekend, the trade war is ignited. The tariffs are set at 25% on Canada and Mexico. And before you know it, voila, Panama says we're ending our deal with China, not renewing anything with them. Forget the Belt and Road Initiative. And we're going to be talking to Donald Trump about doing things with the United States. So a huge win, Panama Canal back in our direction. Guess who capitulates in about 8 hours or so? Both Mexico and Canada. Justin Trudeau waving the white flag saying, no mas, I do not want that smoke from El Trompito Donald Trump. Great news. As well as President Claudia Sheinbaum from Mexico. Fantastic. I tell you, it's a great feeling winning, right? It's great to know that we're in good shape. And we talked about this on Friday, and I think the consensus opinion with our guests and with our callers was that it would not be very wise for Canada to engage in this, or even Mexico, because they didn't have the economic wherewithal to withstand a trade war for any sustained period of time. So just as quickly as it began, it's now over. Canada has agreed to put 10,000 troops on the northern border to stop fentanyl. They're appointing their own fentanyl czar to stop the flow of illegal drugs into the country. Mexico also doing their fair share, putting their own 10,000 troops at the southern border, pushing back on the cartels that push them around. Very exciting times. So in a matter of days, you've got a win with Panama, a win with Mexico, and a win with Canada. Not to mention all of the winning that's going on with the deportations. And of course, there's we're doing so much winning over here. You've got the radical left who, every now and again they masquerade as different movements. When I was younger, it was Occupy Wall Street, right? Then I guess in recent years, it became the George Floyd rioters, and then they became the Hamas rioters. Well, now they're the we don't want to be deported rioters. And they're out there and they're doing all sorts of protesting, shutting down traffic in California, waving Mexican flags all over the place, saying, we don't want to be deported. You've got the rest of them parading as trans supporters that are protesting the end of gender-affirming care. All of that in, 10 or 12 days, right? Is that how long Trump's been in office? Something like that, if you count business days. Excuse me. Very interesting time. What a record the president has. But I've got so much audio that I want to share with you guys, and I'm going to get to it because, it's radio. And in radio, we love to give you some audio so you can use your mind. This is, after all, theater of the mind, so that you can really get a sense of what's going on. But I wanted to play this clip for you. I'm just trying to find it here. Do we have the clip of the protesters, Count Delacula? Let me see if it's the one I'm thinking of. 28. Yeah, this is the trans protesters outside of NYU Hospital, and they're all up in arms because the president signed this executive order saying that the federal government will not fund any surgeries on minors that are considered gender-affirming care, right? Sex changes, genital mutilation, mastectomy, that type of thing. Listen to this.
This entire city down! Not on our watch. Because what they will try to do, they will try to separate us. They will kick the trans people off the bus. They're kicking the indigenous people off the bus. They're kicking our intersex community off the bus. Our two-sphere plus family, they're kicking them off the bus. They just want a membership LGBT bus. Well, guess what, babe? That LGBT bus, it's not going to have any gas. It won't have any tires. You're not going any far. Because we are a community that is made and has been woven with the fire and the spirit of revolution. Revolution! Revolution! So the people that are not here with us, we will take note. It's not that cold.
I don't know where to start or end with this one, right? I mean, the video here, Theater of the Mind, I'll give you with this one. This is a large man with a serious 5 o'clock shadow. I'm going to say African-American man wearing a reddish strawberry blonde wig, wearing a dress, surrounded by people outside of New York University Medical Center in New York City, and giving this speech and all of this hoopla. For what? Because somehow children are not going to be allowed to get surgery that could permanently scar them for life? That President Trump has signed an executive order saying if they want to get this surgery, the government won't fund it, and ideally they should be getting it when they're legal adults? This is how we respond to autonomy and protecting our children. Anyway, we're going to get into all of this stuff, all of these big wins, also some military action over the weekend. Trump okaying his first military strike, ordering a drone hit. I'm going to give you some details on that when we return. And I want to thank you guys for tuning into the radio because Friday, I guess it might have been Friday night, I think we aired our 500th episode of America at Night. And that was cool. It was a nice milestone, right? A monumentous occasion. So happy to have been here for 500 of these shows labeled America's Night. Obviously, we did a bunch of shows, probably another few hundred, under the name The Jim Bohannon Show with Rich Valdez. So really is a pleasure, though, to celebrate that. And for those that came to the celebration we had in Jersey over the weekend, thank you for that. It was a real pleasure. Big thanks to Assembly Member Robert Auth, who came and awarded the show a citation and a proclamation from the state of New Jersey. That was really nice to be acknowledged that way. And as well as this really amazing Trump impersonator that came, a guy named Tommy Trump 47. This guy's terrific. Looks like Trump, sounds like Trump, really, really funny. Had a lot of jokes. Some of those videos and photos are on my Instagram. But again, none of that's possible without you all, the listeners. And it's so important that we have listeners on our program because without listeners, we don't have a program. I say that all the time. But I want to make sure that everybody understands this importance, right? Because radio, to me, it's very important. When you tune into Rich Valdez, America at Night, you know, you want to hear a good show, right? And I want to give you the best show I can give you. And that's why we try to bring you the best guests that we can bring you. And I know some of you struggle with getting good reception in your homes. And that's why C. Crane has this amazing product. The C. Crane CC Wi-Fi 3 Internet Radio, it's your solution. Here's why. The CC Wi-Fi 3 is so special. You can connect the CC Wi-Fi 3 to the internet. This is an internet radio. And you're ready to tune in to over 30,000 radio stations worldwide, including stations carrying my show. No static, no fade. The voice-focused audio surpasses any smartphone on the market. Plus, there's no need to sign into any apps. You don't have to worry about additional monthly fees or eavesdropping, microphones, pop-up ads, none of that, nada. Now, you also have a full-size remote control, so finding what you want while relaxing in your easy chair, it's never been simpler. It even doubles as a Bluetooth speaker for your favorite music and podcasts when I'm not live on the air. Doesn't get better than that. Now, to order the CC Wi-Fi 3, just call C. Crane. Here's their number, 800-522-8863. That's 800-522-8863. Use code RICH at checkout for 10% off orders that are over $75. Just go to C. Crane online at ccrane.com/rich. That's CCRANE.com/rich.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. I said very clearly during my confirmation hearing that every dollar we spend and every program we fund, that will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. And USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct the sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. We're spending taxpayer money here. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. And we owe the American people the assurances that every dollar we are spending abroad is being spent on something that furthers our national interest. And so far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
That, of course, is Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussing the halt of foreign aid to so many nations, and what a laundry list of different types of expenses. Last week we heard about, I think it was $50 million going to condoms headed for the Gaza Strip. Today I heard about nearly the same amount for transgender operas in Colombia. And the list goes on and on. It's quite laughable, honestly, but you can't laugh because it's true. It sounds like sketch comedy, and I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the ISIS strike in Somalia. President Trump ordering his first military strike since being in office. We'll get to that as well straight ahead. But right now, I want to bring us our guest, former United States Deputy National Security Advisor, Victoria Coates. She's with the Heritage Foundation now as their VP of National Security and Foreign Policy. Victoria Coates, welcome back.
Rich, good to be with you. Great to see you in person the other day.
Oh, yes. It was wonderful. Great to make your acquaintance in person as well at the Heritage Foundation. You definitely do not have a face for radio, and you look better in real life than you do on TV. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it.
Now, I want to get your take on this. Obviously, this is your wheelhouse, foreign policy, national security, and the president has been, mincing no words on what he wants to do. Secretary Rubio, I think, has also followed that same lead, and he's been very direct on this stuff. Now, it's almost kind of crazy how bizarre some of these payments have been. But what's your take on this halt of USAID funds?
Now, this is utterly necessary. USAID has turned into an independent fiefdom within the United States government, which exists and has existed since the 1990s to further its own programs. And if your listeners will forgive me, if you go back in a deep dive, USAID was created by John Kennedy in the early 60s to promote U.S. values abroad to counter the Soviets. And its heyday was between 1989 and 1992, around the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of the Cold War, helping our Eastern European Soviet bloc friends come out from under communism. These were good programs that led to staunch allies like Poland, Romania, the Baltic states. This was really good money invested. But once that mission was gone, Rich, once, communism had fallen, it then became, as you said, a kind of a global charity where we were just going to invest millions and then billions of dollars of taxpayer money into, social experiments around the globe. And what it wound up doing was making us less popular because a lot of countries don't want a woke liberal agenda imposed on them for U.S. aid dollars. And so it had become utterly counterproductive, as Secretary Rubio said. And I think that really the only answer was to disband it.
Now, I want to ask a question, and I really do appreciate your critique, your admonition, and your candor in responding to it. But I've always viewed USAID and in many ways the foreign policy that the nation, not you in particular, not the Trump administration, but in general, I've always seen foreign aid almost as a bribe to many countries in lieu of we'll bomb you. And I know this sounds ignorant from my part, and perhaps it is because I'm not in your shoes, but how accurate is this statement that I just made, in your opinion?
No, I don't think it's inaccurate at all. And I've actually banned the term foreign policy from the Heritage Foundation. We talk about national security. I want to talk about the issues that touch on Americans' lives, not on some kind of abstract theory that the State Department or USAID might want to talk about. So I think right there, you're 100% accurate. And much rather than bribing folks so they won't get bombed, another option is something President Trump talked about today when he signed the executive order to create to explore the possibility of a sovereign wealth fund for the United States so that we would have a vehicle to harvest excess capital that could then be invested, sometimes, yes, in foreign countries for things that would be beneficial for us. So if we have a country that wants to be a customer for our natural gas, well, we might invest in a natural gas receptacle for that country. That could be a good thing for us. And then we sign contracts with them, with our natural gas producers. This is mutually beneficial, but it's not a bribe.
Right. And I think that's the key. Right. I really got to tell you, the more I see Trump in action on the world stage, the more remarkable his skills in foreign policy are. It almost makes it seem like the real prescription for a good statesman is someone maybe coming out of the private sector who's never run for public office, kind of like President Trump, because he's doing such a good job with this huge win with Panama, huge win with Mexico, huge win with Canada. And I want to talk about that as well as the strikes in Somalia. So stick with us. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates is with us. She's VP over at the Heritage Foundation overseeing national security, and she's our guest. Don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
30-day reprieve. That's the headlines. Breathe at least a month-long sigh of relief. The Prime Minister putting on X. I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. 10,000 also the number of troops that Mexico announced would be heading to their border. The statement goes on to say from the Prime Minister, in addition, and this is all new, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I have also, the Prime Minister writes, signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be, backing it up with $200 million. Proposed tariffs, and here is the headlines, will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together.
That's Vashi Kapelos with Canada's CTV. And I've got to say, I am not tired of winning yet. Claudia Sheinbaum, president of Mexico, announcing the same. President Trump getting our North American neighbors on board with his policy in these 10, 12 days that he's been in office. And I couldn't be happier. I want to continue to get reaction to this, as well as the ISIS strikes coming up with Victoria Coates. She was the Deputy National Security Advisor in the Trump White House in his first term. She is the VP of National Security at the Heritage Foundation, and she's with us live right now. Victoria Coates, what do you think of this?
This is amazing, Rich, and it's important to remember that both Sheinbaum in Mexico and Trudeau in Canada are hard left governments. These are not conservative governments aligned with President Trump who are likely to play ball. And today we have $1.3 billion from our Canadian friends committed to border security and 10,000 Mexican troops committed to border security that we did not have yesterday. We did not have for 4 years under President Biden. So that's in one day after, threatening these tariffs. So I think a 30-day pause now, given that they've both moved so far, is perfectly logical. I think the negotiations, as your reporter said, will go on during that period, and we'll see what else they need to do. But the president is just making 100% clear that this is going to be the deal going forward, and it is now equally clear today that even left-wing governments will play ball.
Any downside for the United States with a deal like this?
Really, I don't see one. I mean, everybody was squawking and screaming about, prices are going to go up, this, that, and the other. Oh, my gosh, Alberta crude, what are we going to do? Well, yes, we do import a lot of crude from Alberta. It's a critical relationship. But they don't have another customer for that dark, heavy crude. So they need us to buy it as much as we need to buy it. So as long as that's an even playing field and each of us are getting a lot out of the relationship, great. They can't just get all the benefits.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, this is a really well-played move by, I like to call him El Trompito, because I think it really just made, there was nothing but upside for us and a whole lot of downside for both of these countries. And I'm surprised that they both pushed back. I think it would have been smarter for them to, rather than push back and then capitulate, it might have been smarter to just say, we're looking forward to working with Trump and generate that goodwill. Why do you think they pushed back?
Well, I think in hindsight, you're 100% correct. But I think going into this, they had maybe heard words like this before, but they hadn't seen them followed up. And I don't think anybody thought Trump was actually going to sign those EOs the way he did. They thought he's going to walk right up there to the line, and then all of the screams and cries from our friends at the Wall Street Journal that, the sky's going to fall and the streets will run with blood, disaster will strike. He just said, no, I'm doing it. And he said there might be a temporary disruption, I believe he called it.
Temporary pain, he said. Temporary pain.
Temporary pain. The American people will understand, will get through it. And what he knew was the pain for the people of Mexico and Canada was going to be much faster and much more immediate and much more dramatic, and that they couldn't afford to do it. So he called their bluff.
Yeah, very well calculated, in my opinion, and appropriate use of tariffs. Now, I want to pivot from here to a report we've got on the ISIS strikes before we wrap. Listen to this.
President Donald Trump claims to have killed many ISIS terrorists with pinpoint airstrikes in Somalia. The Republican on Saturday announced the US military bombed terror targets cowering away inside caves as he vowed to kill any other militants hiding out. Trump announced the strikes on the Truth Social platform, saying they targeted a senior ISIS attack planner. Trump said, quote, "These killers who we found hiding in caves threaten the United States and our allies." He went on to say, "The strikes destroyed the caves they live in and killed many terrorists without in any way harming civilians."
That's James Halpin reporting for The Sun. And Victoria Coates, what say you here? This was, I think, unexpected by a lot of people. I think this, one of President Trump's strengths, and it's my assessment of him, maybe I'm wrong in this, is that he's relatively a wild card. You know, people don't know which way he's going to go. But one thing I think you can always count on is if he said it, he's going to do his damnedest to do it.
No, absolutely. And I call this cleanup on aisle 5. So this, if your listeners can think about it, if you think about the Red Sea going between up to the Mediterranean Sea through the Suez Canal, on the one side you have Yemen with the Houthi terrorists who are supplied by the Iranians. On the African side you have Somalia with the Al-Shabaab and ISIS terrorists. And I think President Trump is very intent on freeing up that major shipping lane, and he wants to kill the terrorists who are threatening commercial shipping through that area. And you can start in Somalia. And he doesn't want to hurt civilians. He doesn't want to start a war. We informed the government of Somalia. And so, there's no disruption there. But in this case, we have killed a lot of major terrorists who are all listed under the U.S. government. And it's a good thing. It sends a strong message to all the terrorists in the region of whatever stripe that the President of the United States is not going to tolerate you anymore. And, we've seen for the last 4 years commercial shipping just being harassed going through that major lane. Now, the interesting thing to me is the Europeans and the Chinese are much more dependent on that shipping lane than we are. So I'm all for freeing it up. But that's why President Trump, to bring it back to our own hemisphere, is so focused on the Panama Canal, because that's our shipping lane. That's the one we use all the time. And so I think this is just sending a message that he's going to clean these things up, but it's going to be both here at home as well as abroad.
Outstanding. Now, do you anticipate any pushback from China on the Panama deal or even ISIS retaliation for this strike?
Well, no, China's only going to be happy about the ISIS folk being incommoded in the Red Sea. I mean, that actually helps them. And if they would like to pony up the way the United States has for the Panama Canal, if they would like to enter into the actually mutually beneficial arrangements with the government of Panama that we have, they're more than welcome to do so. But I think Panama looked at the deals they had from China, since they weren't pushed back on by the Biden administration. Sure, they're going to do it, but it doesn't compare to what they're offered by the United States. And China can't offer that. So I don't think they're really going to have a leg to stand on.
Now, Victoria Coates, I want you to let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with all the amazing work you're doing at Heritage and otherwise. Let them know.
Oh, yeah, I really appreciate that, Rich. We're so blessed at the Heritage Foundation to have so many Americans supporting us. We appreciate that so much. I'm at Victoria Coates on X, and you can find all of our work on heritage.org.
Outstanding. Victoria Coates, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I'm really happy to speak with you.
Thank you, Rich. You're the best.
Thank you. All right, amigos, when we come back, we find out who was aboard that plane that went down in Philly. Sadly, there's a little girl. Everybody on that plane is declared dead. We're going to get to that, as well as your calls and more. Open phones across America, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Now is also the time to choose Canada. There are many ways for you to do your part. It might mean checking the labels at the supermarket and picking Canadian-made products. It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon, or foregoing Florida orange juice altogether. It might mean changing your summer vacation plans to stay here in Canada and explore the many national and provincial parks, historical sites, and tourist destinations our great country has to offer.
Blah, 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 blah. They should have been playing a violin in the background. That's Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, sucking up to his people, trying to get them to lay off of American goods. That was Friday or Saturday, right before Trump actually went in and put those tariffs on him. And man, what a new song he's singing today, right? Unbelievable. What an about face he did, saying, I'm very pleased with the initial outcome. And he is such a wuss. When you think of wuss, this is the man that comes to mind for me. Just a genuinely weak man, like a wallflower. He's just something else. I don't know how he became prime minister. I want to know. If you're in Canada, I want to know, what did this man do to become prime minister? Let's hit the phones, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Lo and behold, we've got Tony in Montreal, Canada, calling us, listening on WVMT out of Vermont. Strong signal carries into Canada. Tony, how did this man become your prime minister?
Well, I'm going to say good. I'm glad to hear from you from Radio Free North America, and you are the dean of free speech, my friend. Because I'll explain something to you. If you give me the time, I'm going to tell you. Justin Trudeau came along when there was decimation in the Liberal Party, and he came along and used his noblesse oblige name. He tried to pretend he was a Kennedy. He used his Kennedy-esque name. Obviously, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was a fantastically superior prime minister in our country. He was considered, I would say, he would be a Republican-type prime minister because a super conservative guy and a constitutionalist and a constitutional scholar and a constitutional professor. His son is not any of those, and therefore he used his public image, he used his DEI attitude, and he sort of snookered the entire population, which is his generation. The people that are my generation, I never voted for him. I would never vote for him. And I'll tell you, I have voted in every federal election in my entire life. I'm 65 years old. I protest. I would not vote for him. And your description of him being let's say a weak person. I won't go to the pejorative, but he is a weak person, and he is a malleable person. Let's talk about the serious nature of what President Trump was saying. President Trump is saying, secure the border, and I will not tariff you. It's a simple thing. Call the man up and say, President Trump, how are you? Congratulations. The people of Canada want a secure border. What do you suggest? If I were the prime minister of our country, I would have said, our sharpshooters, the greatest sharpshooter army on the planet, I will put them on the Coventry border where this person shot and killed an American agent, which is an embarrassment to our country. I would have said, I would have lined up the border from Prince Edward Island, well, let's say New Brunswick and Maine border, all the way across the border where there is any traffic. And I would have made sure that our good soldiers, our fantastic soldiers, would have arrested anybody coming across, which means going from Canada into U.S. or from the U.S. coming into Canada. And we would be just as happy as the people in your country being secured down in the southern border of the United States. And all that took, Rich, was some type of communication, some type of, hello,
but instead, he
respect.
starts telling you, Tony, to drink Canadian rye instead of drinking Kentucky bourbon, thinking that's going to be effective.
Bro, listen to me. your country. I'm going to run down to Waterville, Maine. I'm going to buy myself some Kentucky bourbon, which is $19 for a 40, and that's $80 for a 40 in Canada. And I'm going to drink with my friends down in Maine. I'm going to call my buddies from college, Danny O'Halloran, who may be the next senator from Maine, and take Susan Collins out. And I'm suggesting Danny O'Halloran do that from the Laverdier O'Halloran family in Maine. And I'll call up Jimmy Erskine, my old hockey buddies, and I'm going to tell them, let's have a couple of Kentucky bourbons. And what I'll tell you, Rich, is if you're ever in Maine, you go down and you have a C-shot, S-E-A-S-H-O-T, a C-shot, a Mariner's drink. That's a 3-ounce whiskey shot. Woo. And that's what I'll do. I will drink my Kentucky bourbon, my Wild Turkey, my Schlitz, my Old Milwaukee, and he will not tell me how to run my life. I do not.
You know why, Tony? Because you're a man's man, and he sounds like a girly man, like Arnold used to say. Tony in Montreal, we're going to leave it there. Got to run. Appreciate it, brother. Give him fire up there. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue the conversation with you, all the American people, on open phones across America. But before I get into your calls, I need to talk about this. Let me see. Where did it go? It's the story from Friday that, it was breaking news while we were on the air about the plane, the Medivac plane that went down. And I spoke, believe it or not, on Saturday. Like I said, my jewelry business in Jersey, I had a small cocktail party there celebrating the 500th episode of Rich Valdez, America at Night. And one of the guests, a surprise to me, I did not know he was coming. He came with somebody else that I was expecting, and I forgot that they knew each other, was Tony Grady, the military pilot. Excuse me. And we were talking a little bit about this series of plane incidents. And the unfortunate reality is that the patient was 11 years old, and everybody else that was on that plane did, in fact, succumb to their injuries. The young patient and 5 others were killed when the plane crashed in Pennsylvania, according to the New York Post. Valentina Guzman Murillo and her mother, Liseth Murillo Osuna, 31 years old, the captain, as well as the co-pilot, and their physician. All died when the Learjet 55 crashed. And this is, very unfortunate, right? I mean, you don't know what to say. I kind of get a little tongue twisted. I hate talking about children being hurt. It's a soft spot for me, for sure. And I just wanted to give you an update on that because we'll be talking about a lot of that stuff a little bit later. But very, very sobering, right? It makes you put your own life in perspective, I feel. I look at that stuff and I say, man, thank God I'm okay. Thank God my kids are okay. And, sometimes you think you're going through it. You're not going through it quite that bad, like her surviving family. So anyway, folks, the music means it's time for me to go. I bid you adieu. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America. God bless you and have a great night. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? It's Rich Valdez. Happy to be here with you. We're live, we're national, Valdez with an S, by the way, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I am not tired of winning yet. I said that before. I'll say it again. I'm doubling down on that. By the way, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is daring the feds to pull up at his house. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I want to talk about El Trompito, Donaldus Magnus, and all of the wins that we're having right now on tariffs. Because tariffs, it's a double-edged sword, right? There can be an upside, there can be a downside. On the upside, you make these revenues. On the downside, if it doesn't fly right, it can increase the cost of goods. We haven't seen that happen in large part right now because I think what Trump ideally intends to use them for works, right? He says, if you don't want to do this, then we will impose a high tariff, which is bone-crushing, right? It's a bone-crushing tariff. So he did this with Mexico. He did it with Canada. Panama's already playing ball, and they've decided to come back into the fold, giving the United States the control of the Panama Canal yet again, and those negotiations are ongoing. Mexico, President Sheinbaum, now deciding, yes, we are going to be with El Trompito, and we're going to put 10,000 troops at the border. You've got Justin Trudeau, or as one of our callers from Canada calls him, Justine Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, also saying he's adding 10,000 troops and a fentanyl czar to help bolster the border, to protect it from drugs and illegal aliens. And they're all playing ball with Trump, so they all have a 30-day pause on what's going on. And I think this is very good. Now, the upside, they don't get the tariff, and Trump gets what he wants. Sean Spicer just tweeted, the former White House press secretary. He said, here's how it works. Trump asks for something from foreign leaders. Foreign leaders say no. Democrats say tariffs don't work. Trump imposes tariffs, gets what he wants. It's like a little circular diagram. It was really funny. I tweeted it out if you want to take a look at it, at Rich Valdez with an S. But I want to talk about what Trump had to say, because he was at a press conference, obviously, in the Oval Office, and he was explaining how tariffs are going to work for America. Listen to this.
Look at Colombia. Look at what happened with that. Everybody said that with Colombia it was going to be a disaster. In one hour, everything was settled. You know why? Tariffs. Without tariffs, they wouldn't have been the same way. They would not have treated me the way they treated me, which was extremely nicely. And I don't want to use countries, I don't want to use names, but tariffs are very powerful, both economically and in getting everything else you want. Tariffs for us, nobody can compete with us because we're the pot of gold. But if we don't keep winning and keep doing well, we won't be the pot of gold, and then tariffs won't be so good for us. But when you're the pot of gold, the tariffs are very good. They're very powerful, and they're going to make our country very rich again.
Making our country rich again. There's an economics guy, a financial guy that we bring on the show from time to time, Derek Kinney, and he sent me something the other day, a comment on Instagram, and he said, make America rich again. I said, I'm going to make hats and shirts like that. Make America rich again. I like that slogan. Anyway, that's how tariffs are going to work. They're going to make America rich again. And I want to get the input from a former White House economist. He was on the White House Council of Economic Advisors, Tomas Philipson. He was part of Trump's initial administration in the White House, and he knows his stuff when it comes to this, and he's going to be joining us in the next segment, at least he's scheduled to join us in the next segment, to give us his thoughts on the impact that tariffs can have, whether it's tariffs on China or any of the other proposed tariffs that President Trump has put out there. And thus far, Trump's record is looking stellar. Hasn't imposed any tariffs. He just says he's going to do it, and he's getting a lot done on the foreign policy front. So you got to give him kudos for that, for sure. And straight ahead, Tomas Philipson. Keep it locked right here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There is more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
President Trump has agreed to pause tariffs on Mexico for 1 month in exchange for Mexico placing troops along the border. The post from the president via Truth Social, and I do want to bring it to you here in full, as it says this. I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border, separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for 1 month period, during which we will have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in those negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries.
That is a report on the update from President Trump that we've been discussing with the tremendous wins. And we're talking about wins on many angles, right? You're talking about win with Panama, getting the Panama Canal back. Now, Trump weighed in on that as well. He was on the tarmac last night saying, look, he warned us that he was going to take Panama Canal back. And this is something very powerful that's happening. Listen to this.
Very happy people right now. Nobody thought that was going to happen. So they are home, they're safe, and they're with their families. That was a big one. Secretary of State Rubio is in Panama right now, and we're talking about the Panama Canal. What they've done is terrible. They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
Something very powerful is going to happen. And guess what? It happened. The United States taking back the Panama Canal. Panama announcing they're seizing their deal with China, the Belt and Road Initiative. He was talking about they're back home safe with their families. He's talking about the Venezuelan hostages that were released by Secretary Rubio's negotiations, hostages that were being held by Venezuela. Big win again with Mexico succumbing to the tariff threat, capitulating to President Trump's request for them to put troops on the southern border to protect their side of the border and prevent fentanyl and prevent illegal immigration. Justin Trudeau doing the same thing in Canada. Capitulating after pushing back on the tariff threat, putting 10,000 troops on the northern border in Canada, saying he's looking forward to working with the Trump administration, and appointing a fentanyl czar in Canada. So lots of interesting things going on because of tariffs, but I want to dig in. I want to get a little bit of an update on the economic impact of what tariffs, what we can expect from them. And we're going to do that with Tomas Philipson. He was an economist. He is an economist, but he was with the council. He was the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the White House, and he's an economist at the University of Chicago. Tomas, welcome back, sir.
Good to be with you again.
You bet. So what are your thoughts on all of these outcomes with the threat of tariffs and all of that geopolitical stuff? And do you think that tariffs are only useful as a tool to bargain, or is it truly a a segue to like pre-1913 America, where we used tariffs for a whole lot of revenue?
Well, I think the bargaining issue, I think, is very important. I mean, the way I compare it to is Reagan's kind of peace through strength in regular wars. And basically,
right.
There we had nuclear weapons developed. We haven't used them in 80 years since World War II, but it obviously gave us a ton of leverage. This is a cheaper method of getting leverage because we have a strong economy up and running. And as a byproduct of that, we can threat people not to trade with that economy through tariffs or other means, essentially. And that threat doesn't cost us anything. A military threat costs us, 14% of the federal spending or 3% of GDP. This is a free threat, essentially, compared to that kind of threat. And he's using it. We used it in the first administration. We threatened wine tariffs on France to have them back off digital tariffs on our big tech companies. But now we have a string of Colombia, Mexico, Canada, and China is coming back to the phase one agreement we struck in the first administration. So it's working very, very effectively so far. We'll see what happens after a month here. But, I mean, these concessions are, a direct result of just a very useful use of this free threat, essentially, to not trade with us.
Now, Tomas Philipson, I want to ask you about the overall use of tariffs. I think there's a lot of people that don't like tariffs. I know that they can push up the cost of goods in certain circumstances if, everybody decides to dig their heels in the ground. Thus far, I think it's worked out really well because the bargaining made sense. Do you see them as a risky proposition, or are you on board with the replacing maybe part of our taxation with the revenue from tariffs?
Yeah, that's one issue, right? So the question is, you're imposing. In general, I think people misperceive the total tax package of what Trump is doing as inflationary, which I think is very, very misguided. Yeah. Because it's deflationary on our domestic trade. Most of our trade in the U.S. occurs between U.S. citizens, not between U.S. and foreign citizens. So, imports are about 13% of relative GDP. The often discussed Chinese imports is only 2% relative to GDP. So if you slap on a tariff of 10% on China, that's 0.2% relative to, GDP. It's a small amount of our economic activity that we're much more self-sufficient as an economy than other countries are. They need us a lot more than we need them. So all this stuff on lowering taxes at home and deregulating at home is going to essentially reduce domestic trade barriers, even though if the tariffs are potentially, international trade barriers between us and foreigners. But that's going to be small in comparison to the 85% of economic activity that takes place just domestically, and that's where the costs are going to come down more dramatically with either tax cuts, especially if it gets the corporate rate down to 15, but also other forms of deregulatory measures which take away trade. When you have a permit that it takes 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years to build something, that's a trade barrier. You can't have economic activity for 3 or 4 years until the thing goes up, essentially. So those barriers are much more significant, and it's going to be deflationary relative to the potential of an inflationary tariffs. But I think also the tariffs are misperceived. I mean, if you listen to Democrats, corporate tax cuts are for billionaires. So corporate, taxes on foreign companies, then if you raise them, are just paid by foreign billionaires. That's an extreme version of the Democrats agreeing with Trump that foreigners pay the tariffs. I don't think that's fully true. I think it's spread between shareholders, workers, and prices for consumers. But it's not just a sales tax which gets slapped on unilaterally on you as consumers just because you tax foreign companies. I think that's kind of misleading. But there will be some price increases. But those are insignificant relative to the value of reducing domestic trade barriers.
So in your opinion, it seems like it's all upside, which is good news.
Yeah, I mean, especially the domestic stuff, which I think we haven't seen that yet. Obviously OMB is going to be and the Department of Government Efficiency are going to do a massive sort of deregulatory activity or cutting regulations. And that's, we haven't seen the full force of that yet. I assume it's going to be pretty dramatic. And then if we can get the tax cuts in place as well, we're going to see a lot more capital coming into the country. But we're also going to see a lot more investment from our existing capital base in the U.S.
Now, from the time you spent as chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, would you say that it's an ambitious goal or an impossible goal to achieve the DOGE goal of, what is that, reducing the deficit by $2 trillion?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. So if you look at the mandatory programs, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, defense, defense is not mandatory, but those things and interests we're not willing to cut, right? Many people don't want to touch. Yeah, exactly. So basically, that's 75% of total spending. So then you go after what's called discretionary spending, and it's going to be tough. What I think will happen is that Medicaid has a lot of ineligible spending on ineligible people in the program that the Biden administration just handed out money to everyone, even though they were not eligible. Yeah. Yeah, but it's particularly the ineligible people. They're not consistent with the statute. So the question is, that's the biggest one on the state level. Basically a third of revenues of the states come from these grants that they had an executive order to start looking over, right? And the question is, how much of that is, ineligible, expensive? But sooner or later, our country probably has to means test the big programs like Medicare and Social Security. I've predicted that for a long time. Sooner or later, we're going to have rich people not in these programs, which is going to make seniors better off, not worse off when you cut these programs, because the rich people are now essentially forced to pay taxes to be strangled by being in a monopoly, essentially a government monopoly, which is what Medicare as a health plan is, and Social Security as a savings plan. So you're making people free of that monopoly when you start means testing it, which presumably makes them better off, essentially. So I think sooner or later, maybe not this year, I don't think maybe even in the Trump administration, but sooner or later you're going to see that come into force. It's already taking place a little bit in the Medicare drug benefit more than the other benefits in terms of means testing.
Right. All right, and with a minute to go before the music kicks in, I want to get your take on the IRS, right? Because Trump introducing the Department of External Revenue, the External Revenue Service. What do you think about the rumblings that we might see the abolition of the IRS?
IRS is going to be there because we're going to need most of our income or tax revenue from the domestic taxes. I don't think the External Revenue Service is welcome, but it's not going to replace the internal IRS.
Outstanding analysis, as always. Thanks for answering the tough questions and straightening out what the left has been peddling out there. Tomas Philipson, former chairman of the Council of White House Economic Advisors and economist at the University of Chicago. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, you, of course, have a track record now. People have heard you, and they know that, in fact, you've got the goods. You have the talent, and you have the ability to do a superb job.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is one of my favorites right here. I'm going to let it play for a second. It's like marching band. You can't see me, but I'm chair dancing here. All right, here we go. So, Tomas Philipson, he was, again, the chairman of economic advisors in the White House in the first Trump administration, and making the bold prediction that the IRS will continue, making the another bold prediction that the Medicaid system is going to be the first that will endure means tests in order to survive, because it's along with the debt service and our military budget, 75% of all U.S. spending. And I think that's a good idea. Now, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, only because it just wasn't something on my agenda. But during Barack Obama's presidency, and more so during Biden's presidency, they really enhanced many things. For example, free and reduced lunch used to be for people that were making, that were in the percentage of people that were 50%, above, or 25% above poverty. Now, these numbers go up to 75 and 100%, right? Where you could be so far removed from the poverty line and still get government benefits. And this is happening across the board. People who have ADHD, like me. I could be talking and be on an incredible tangent and just draw a blank. Draw a blank and be like, what? Which way did he go, George? And this doesn't mean that I should qualify for supplemental SSD or SSI, the disability. Take two. See, I can't even talk. Disability benefits from Social Security. But yet there's a bunch of people with ADHD that are applying for SSI and getting it, claiming that they're disabled. And they're not 65, but they're expanding the criteria to qualify for these programs. And then if they get Medicaid along with that, voila. So imagine if you got a bunch of 30-somethings that are saying, oh, I don't know, I get stressed out when my boss asks me to show up on time and do this and do that, and I don't like it, and Trump gives me, the heebie-jeebies, and that Rich Valdez, barf, right? And they can't stand any of us. So all of a sudden now, they should not work and we should pay? Or I want to come to America because, I hear it's better there, and they put you up at the Roosevelt Hotel and they can give you money, and none of this stuff works. There's a lot of money being spent here, especially people getting Medicaid, knowing that Medicaid is... So I think Medicaid's going to tighten up. Now, Democrats will threaten that, saying that this is going to be the end of the road for Medicaid. Trump is going to draconian measures. He's going to get rid of Medicaid. We told you he was horrible. No. We're just going to restore Medicaid to where it was originally intended to be, a social safety net for the most vulnerable, not something for everybody. It can't be. It's unsustainable. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. Really good interview. He didn't have the opportunity to stick around, so we had to cram a lot into that one segment. But very, very good stuff. Now, I want to switch gears to the Garden State, New Jersey, right? You guys know I was born in Brooklyn, New York, came to Jersey around 12 years old, went to grammar school. I finished grammar school here, middle school, and went to high school in North Bergen High School, Hudson County, New Jersey. And I can tell you that the things have changed, right? Things have changed. And one of the things that I think is interesting about Jersey is how blue it is. It's very difficult to even sell a red idea around here. It really is. This is, people say California is such a leftist bastion. I would say it's Jersey, but maybe we're turning the corner, right? I mean, New Jersey never elected a Ronald Reagan. They did, but he didn't come from here. He wasn't governor of New Jersey. He was governor of California. He was president of the Screen Actors Guild. Who do we have? We've got a guy who was from Goldman Sachs, who replaced Christie, who replaced a guy from Goldman Sachs. It's like New Jersey has a thing for that. So here we are with our former Goldman Sachs guy, Phil Murphy, who, probably is a decent person, but because of the way he governs, I was rude to him once, and I feel badly about that. It wasn't the right thing to do, but I couldn't help but heckle the guy. He was in a parade walking outside my house, and I was like, boo, and all my neighbors looked at me funny. Anyway, Phil Murphy, in an interview today, or yesterday, he says that, let me see what he said, just to give you the context right. He says, good luck coming to my house and taking. He's talking about harboring an illegal alien in his home. Talking about his wife, Tammy, and he doesn't want to get into too much detail, but he says, good luck to the feds coming in to try and get her. I don't know what he's talking about, but it sounds to me like he's got an illegal immigrant in his home, and he's daring the feds to come and get her. Listen to this.
Tammy and I were talking about, I don't want to get into too much detail, but there's someone in our broader universe whose immigration status is not yet at the point that they are trying to get it to. And we said, you know what, let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
Wow. Sounds like he is daring the feds. Now, listen, I don't know if he knows. Those feds that he's daring, that's Tom Homan. And now with the support of Pete Hegseth. Just imagine Tom Homan pulling up in front of Governor Murphy's house, the state police, the governor's guards are outside. What do you think? What's going to happen? Are they going to stand down and let Homan do his job? Are they going to defend the governor like they're supposed to? There's only one choice here. He's going to have to come, Tom Homan, the border czar, is going to have to pull up with who? Dr. Phil, right? He's going to have to pull up with Dr. Phil as a mediator. Dr. Phil's going to have one of those like bulletproof vests on. It says, observer or whatever. And he's going to say, listen, guys, and, do what Dr. Phil does. Like that illegal alien that was like, hey, aren't you Dr. Phil? And caught them all off guard. But I think that's the only way this is going to work. Listen to Homan and Hegseth on this topic.
The first Trump presidency was a game changer, right? Unprecedented success. 45-year low illegal immigration down 90, as high as 91%, depending on what time frame you looked at. But what I'm seeing here, since he took oath of office, President Trump is a game changer. You saw his first administration successful on the border. I've never seen a military flight remove illegal aliens. That happened. I've never seen the amount of engagement from the military on the border, helping secure the border. I've never seen engagement from other law enforcement agencies, whether it's FBI, U.S. Marshals, DEA, DOJ's at the table across the country doing operations. This is a game changer. We will finally succeed and have an operational control of our southern border with this president in charge and my partnership with Pete Hegseth. We're going to make this happen. We will not fail.
Shoulder to shoulder, in every way, every square inch is our responsibility. The president has made that charge clear, and we're going to deliver for him.
I don't think Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, stands a chance if this trio pulls up at his front door. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, border czar Tom Homan, and America's favorite psychologist on television, Dr. Phil. Imagine that. Just imagine the three of them pulling up saying, listen, Phil, come on. The gig is up. Hand her over. Now, of course, I'm being funny here. I don't believe that's ever going to happen. But the nerve and the gall of Governor Murphy to say, good luck. Good luck trying to get her. That's just brazen. And guess what? Before he even said that, Homan addressed that when they asked him, what if local officials, don't want to participate? And he cited chapter and verse of the U.S. Code, and he said, we're going to do our job. Immigration's our jurisdiction. It's a federal jurisdiction. We're going to do it. And he said, right now in this cut, we will not fail. I believe that. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, now. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our late night national town hall conversation with you, the American people, we the people. It's open phones across America, and here's the number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Robert, Rockville, Maryland, listening on WMAL. Robert, go for it. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yes, the thing about Governor Phil Murphy is he's not actually saying that it's an illegal immigrant. He's saying if somebody hasn't reached the immigration status they want yet, which could just mean it's somebody who has a green card who hasn't become a citizen yet.
Well, if that were the case, the feds wouldn't want to go there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a trick. It's just to draw them in, and then when they get there, there's nothing really.
Oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, listen, I think he was being very clever in crafting his words as well. Saying, someone in our orbit, someone in our circle I suggested to Tammy that maybe she should come live with us above our whatever. Good luck with the feds trying to get her there. I get it. Of course, it's bluster. He's just trying to seem like, hey, I'm on your side, the pro-illegal immigrant crowd. Now that I think he's not running for president anymore. I think last year he was a little bit more to the center because he was planning on running for president. Now I think he's kind of given up on that. Maybe I'm wrong. But I agree with you that he's definitely, choosing his words wisely to get that point across. And honestly, I don't know how that would go down. It would make a great ratings for television, especially if Dr. Phil came, right? But I don't know how it would go down in real life. But good observation, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the call, brother. And we continue. I want to go to Steve, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Steve, go for it.
Mr. Valdez, how are you doing?
Wonderful, sir. Thank you.
So you were talking a little bit about what's it called? The Social Security SSI. Yeah.
SSI.
You were
yes.
talking about SSI. Yeah. So I just want to tell the audience and you about my situation with SSI. I met a girl. She literally came out of the woods, like the forest, the trees.
What was she doing in the forest?
She was wet. Well, she had got caught up on crystal meth, and her family hadn't seen her in like 6 months. I found that out later, right? But she gets now I've had her for like 4 years. Her grandmother.
When you say you have her, what does that mean? You've adopted her? Is this a minor?
She's my goddaughter. No, she's
a minor or she's an adult?
27.
Oh, okay, so she's an adult.
She's an adult. Yeah. But so I asked God, what am I supposed to do with this? And he said, keep her and protect her. But luckily, her grandmother had already set up SSI, disability benefits. She used meth, and her brain got, messed up from the meth.
Yeah.
And she literally is not capable of holding a job. Hopefully we'll figure out the right things with medication. I've been trying that for 4 years. She got off of them, went in, back in, and then, it's just, she gets just $670 a month. It's nowhere near what I spend on her, but it's SSI is Medicare. SSI is necessary. Maybe not so much what you were talking about, which is Medicaid.
My comment, just to clarify for you, was that there are people that have gone on SSI, and because they're on SSI, can qualify for Medicaid and then eventually Medicare, that should not, in my opinion, have qualified for it because they've expanded the criteria. Now, whatever the cause of this girl's brain deficit is really irrelevant to the story, in my opinion. If you have someone that has brain damage and they're not capable of working, this is what SSI and these types of programs are for. But when you have someone that is going to say, look, my brain doesn't work right. And I'll be the first one to tell you, my brain does not work right. The GPS tells me make a left in 100 feet. What do? I swing a right. It's amazing, right? But it doesn't mean I can't work. It means I can't work as a truck driver, that's for sure. But it doesn't mean I can't do radio or do other things. I've had a really good career. So I say that because I feel like when you expand the criteria to let lots of people into the category that says we're going to help you because you can't help yourself, that's a mistake. Now, clearly, this person you're describing, they need help. My mother was on SSI before she died. She was in really rough shape. She was in a wheelchair. She had osteoporosis. She had broken her back. And she was oxygen dependent because she'd gotten lung disease from some cleaning chemicals. She had a cleaning company. And, it was a horrible situation. I don't begrudge anybody who's in bad shape. But what I'm saying is people that were pushed into this many ways, right? When you have the federal government opening up guidelines, or even, like I said, with free and reduced lunch. Not that doesn't help every American, but guess what? Not every American needs to have the support of the federal government so that their kid could have lunch. A lot of people can afford to buy their kid lunch, and if they can't, maybe you should get a second job. But it doesn't mean that it has to be a taxpayer-funded endeavor.
Am I on?
Of course.
I totally agree. I don't know if you heard me while you were talking, but I totally agree with you. Medicaid should be. I totally agree that they're. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want. No one should force me, the federal government especially. Well, and nobody else but the federal government can do that. Take money out of my wallet to give to people that are using and abusing the system that our federal government has set up in order to keep their pockets lined. I get that.
Or more so, really, the point I'm making here, Steve, just not to cut you off, but to clarify, it's not even people using and abusing the system. It's really more using the system. It's the bureaucrats that are abusing the system. They're the ones that are expanding this to say, oh, no, you didn't qualify before? No, you'll qualify now. We're going to expand this so that everybody qualifies, right? And when you continue to do that, this is where it becomes problematic because you start to create a bigger and bigger dependency on government and less of a dependency on self-reliance, right? The dependence on yourself. And this, I think, is the grand problem. Steve, I got to hit a break here, but I appreciate the conversation. Folks, more from you straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. Let's go to Denise calling us from the Atlantic City area, WOND. Denise, go right ahead.
I'm actually in Ridgefield today. For what it's worth, I happen to be a veteran, and I see a lot of veteran services getting cut. Thank you. Yeah. I see a lot of cuts being put together. But you know what? I'm on the bus every day of the week. I go to Fort Lee. I go to my VFW post, and I see 20-year-olds, boys, guys, and girls with a Social Security card, and they get on the bus for free. I have to pay my fare.
Wow. Amazing. And I guess they're using a disability ID because they're disabled. And again, might be drug use. It could be the fentanyl crisis. Who knows, right? I don't know. It could be that they're claiming they have ADHD, or maybe because they're trans, they can't work or pay the bus fare. I don't know the answers to these things, but I know it's gone on too far. You know, when I was a kid, you had to pay for everything, and you had to get a job if you couldn't afford it. And I think we kind of need to go back to those times. Denise in Ridgefield and Atlantic City. Shout out to WOND Radio out of Atlantic City, 1400. And folks, we will continue our conversation straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, happy to be here. Another action-packed hour for you, for your pleasure and mine. And I want to hear from you. Give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And President Trump is floating a new idea out there. A sovereign wealth fund. We talked a little bit about that before, and I want to get into it a little bit more now because this is a very interesting idea, right? This is the first ever U.S. sovereign wealth fund that we've ever seen, and one of the things that it could buy potentially could be TikTok. Isn't that something? So listen to this. This is in the New York Post. And President Trump signing this executive order today to create a sovereign wealth fund for the United States, saying that TikTok might be the first one of its acquisitions. Isn't that interesting? Now, you know, I'm all for saying I want a businessman in the White House until it means the government buying stuff like that. I don't know if I want the government buying social media companies. Now, I understand that it's not necessarily a direct acquisition, right? It's something that I guess we could somehow benefit from. I'm going to learn more about it, but I don't like the government running the media, period, owning it, any of that. But let's continue, right? Because I could be misguided here. Maybe I'm not getting it right, but this would be the world's largest and wealthiest sovereign fund. And right now, the other ones that are out there are owned by China, Norway, and some Middle Eastern Emirates. Now, there's not a lot of specificity on how the U.S. endowment would work out, but adding TikTok as an acquisition would be interesting, right? Because they would have to fork over some money. Now, we don't know if Beijing is willing to get rid of it, especially with the 10% tariff that Trump announced on Friday. But interesting, right? It's a very interesting idea that, you know, I for one would love to learn a little bit more about, because I have no idea how this works, and I'm curious, right? But according to the report here, other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and you know they don't own TikTok. So TikTok's a pretty big thing. Chinese divestment from TikTok, which has about 170 U.S. users, 170 million, is a potential path forward for them to avoid the tariff. So thinking is we've threatened the tariff on China, 10% more, and maybe they say, all right, let's let go of TikTok. Okay, that makes sense. And I'm curious to see how this works. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who are leading the effort, gave some brief remarks on the plan. And what they said was, we're going to start this thing up in the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work. I think it's going to be, that was Bessent. He says, I think it's going to be very exciting. We've studied best practices, how this is done around the world. It will be a combination of liquid assets and assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people. Lutnick added that the extraordinary size and scale of U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. He says, if we're going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, Lutnick said, by way of example, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow the health of the American people. It's an interesting idea, right? It'd be kind of like living in a co-op. Right? For those of you who may have lived in co-ops, you know, everybody owns the building, but nobody owns the building. Right? Interesting. the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. Just imagine, I'm taking this to a different level, but if we create this wealth fund, right, if the United States becomes a Wall Street player and we start buying stuff, and now the United States has purchased TikTok, and TikTok stocks, I don't know, they go up through the roof, and there's dividends now, is every American getting a dividend check? Imagine that. Imagine making America wealthy again that way, making America rich again this way. Would I then still sing the song of, I don't like the government owning anything? In effect, it's not the government owning it, it's we the people owning it. And that, to me, sounds very different, right? We've never been down this road before. Fascism? No, thank you. But capitalism empowered by way of our tax dollars, that sounds interesting. Right, it's an interesting idea. The world's largest sovereign wealth fund right now is Norway's 1.7 trillion government pension global fund, which reported $222.4 billion in profit last year. And these are funds reinvested from North Sea petroleum proceeds. Let me see, who else? Oh, topping the 1 trillion in assets in wealth funds. Get this: China, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait. Very nice. These funds are, there's funds also, owned by Saudi Arabia and Singapore that are almost near the top of the list. The president was coy when he was asked what he thought about this from the Oval Office. And we'll see. Because the media's been kind of brutal when it comes to him, like Wall Street Journal, Fox News. So he says, they asked him about Rupert Murdoch, the owner of those, and he says, I have great respect for Rupert Murdoch. Trump is such a G when it comes to this stuff. He really is. And he says, I disagree with him a lot of times with the Wall Street Journal. Trump added, before citing Colombia's recent agreement to accept the return flights of illegal immigrants as evidence that the trade threat works. Well, that's clear. These things work. Look at Colombia. You look at Colombia, you look at Mexico, you look at Canada, you look at Panama. I mean, clearly, the trade threats work. I wish I could talk today. Anyway, very interesting stuff. And I don't even know who to get as a guest on this. Somebody that, I'd love to talk to Howard Lutnick, Secretary Lutnick. I'm sure he's got his hands full right now, but I'd love to hear his thoughts on this because this is a very interesting thing. Maybe we'll try and chat with Dr. Art Laffer or somebody from Heritage on this. Anyway, I thought that was very, very interesting. Because imagine that. Imagine getting dividends, right? Then people will be like, man, I love El Trompito. What else are we buying? What's next on the list? Are we going to own the car companies? Just, again, the idea of the government owning those things. But again, it wouldn't be the government, right? If you're getting a piece of the pie. It's when the government owns it and you don't get a piece of the pie that it becomes problematic. I don't know. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. Curious to see how this plays out. Anyway, I want to continue this conversation as well as add some new topics like what's going on with all these airline crashes, and we're going to do that with a retired pilot. And Colonel Grady is going to be joining us, and I'm looking forward to that. So don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
As of this update, we have positively identified 55 sets of remains. During recovery and salvage operations today, additional human remains were located. These remains, as well as remains that have been recovered previously, are in the process of being positively identified by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the District of Columbia.
That's Assistant Fire Chief in Washington, D.C., Gary Steen, giving you the latest on what happened with the American Airlines flight that collided with a Black Hawk, only to be continued by more tragic news of the 11-year-old girl who received life-saving treatment for spina bifida at Shriners Hospital and then took off on a medevac, leaving the tarmac, and I don't know, a minute or less than 3 minutes later, this plane is exploding in midair and crashing and killing 6 people on board there, her physician, her mom, the pilot, the co-pilot, as well as another individual. Just tragic stuff going on. That follows what happened just about a week ago, where I think it was an F-35 in training crashed in Alaska, where the pilot was able to eject himself out of there. And I want to get the perspective of someone else, right? We've spoken with an executive from Northwest Airlines. We've had some discussion on this, but I want to talk to somebody who was a test pilot for the B-2 stealth bomber, somebody who's a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, retired, somebody who ran for the United States Senate in Nevada, and somebody who's been on the show before. He's the author of American Values, Another Voice, A Pilot's Perspective on Living the American Dream. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Grady, welcome back, sir.
It is great to be on your show. Thank you for having me tonight, Rich.
Oh, you bet, Tony Grady. And, sir, it was great to meet you in person over the weekend. Thanks for surprising me at my little shindig over the weekend. That was really a nice treat to meet you.
Well, it was a treat to meet you and all your homies. I would just like to say that there was a lot of energy in that room, and it was great.
Thank you, brother. And I want to get your perspective on this. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. We don't have to rush through it, but I want to get your perspective from every angle you can offer it, both as a former pilot, as an executive, and, just from a new set of eyes here. But for me, and again, maybe I'm putting on my tinfoil conspiracy hat here, but, when you hear the 3 jet crashes, in, I don't know, 8-day span, 7-day span, something like that, it causes concern for me. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, our hearts go out to everybody affected by this. The nation was affected, but we have families that have this loss. And I want to first say that we pray for them and lift them up, that we can press on. We need to do that. The other thing to be aware of, Rich, that I want to make sure your audience knows, air travel is safe. It is safer than driving your car. It's just that when there are accidents, they tend to be sensational. So put that into perspective. But getting narrower down into this particular accident, they've recovered the 2 black boxes. So in the accident investigation boards, they will be able to piece together what happened. And we should not Monday morning quarterback or second guess anything until we know. Everybody is throwing out this, that, and the other. But this is what we do know. We know that 2 aircraft collided, and in this particular case, it was a helicopter that ran that ran into the passenger jet, and it appears that the helicopter was at the wrong altitude. They'll be able to confirm that. It was not odd for helicopters out of Fort Belvoir to be following the Potomac River under the flight path of landing airplanes. So that's not anything that's odd. But especially when you fly airplanes in the terminal area, which is the area around airports, there are procedures that need to be followed. That's one of the things in aviation that's very unforgiving, from the standpoint that there are procedures that are established when you're around airports, and they have to be followed, and there's reasons for that. So in general, I want people to know that air travel is safe, so not to be overly concerned, and to give the accident investigation boards time to be able to determine exactly what happened. So I'd like to give that overall. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I want to ask you this because I agree with that. I mean, I think for the most part, I've never been in a plane accident. I've been in plenty of car accidents, so I agree with your statement there. But I can tell you this. I think that there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of questions, I should say, around the altitude of the helicopter. Maybe not the path of the helicopter, but the altitude of it. What can you tell us about that?
Well, like I said, the black box is going to tell us exactly. But obviously, something had to be off, or two airplanes would not have been at the same place in the sky at the same time. Yeah. So I have not seen any data that shows exactly where the helicopter was, but there's anecdotal evidence that the helicopter may have been at the wrong altitude.
Now, what about a lack of personnel? We've heard some talk about a lack of personnel from air traffic control that because of their being short-staffed, that there may not have been enough people. It might have been a two-man job, and that night there was only one person on. Your experience with that?
Well, you know, I don't know exactly what the staffing of the tower would be, but I'm sure that at major airports there's a standard as to what the staffing should be. That will be something that will come out in the accident report. So if they were low on staff, that will be a causal factor probably. But at least from the information that I've read, the tower did give the helicopter two call-outs of the jet that was in front of them. And so we'll have to hear what the black boxes say to find out what transpired inside the helicopter as to why, with those calls from the tower, they failed to alter their flight path or their altitude.
Now, Tony Grady, I want to make sure people get a chance to get your book, American Values, Another Voice, A Pilot's Perspective on Living the American Dream. We've had you on in the past. We've talked about the book and why you wrote it. But I want to make sure that people know where to get it. Where do they go?
So there's two places they can go. So they can go to my website, which is called AmericanValuestour.com. That's AmericanValuestour.com. And on there, they'll see a link where they can get the book, or they could go straight to Amazon and they could put in my name and the title and it'll pop up. So those are two areas where they can access the book.
And people who may want to follow you on social media, where do you direct them?
Again, if they go to AmericanValuestour.com, they can click on my links there. They can click on Twitter and Facebook, and they can follow me. So
outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Grady, retired from the United States Air Force. He's the founder of Synerbotics, and he was a test pilot for the B-2 stealth bomber. We covered a lot of ground here. I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for coming out to the party. And I want to encourage all of the listeners to go to your website, AmericanValuestour.com, AmericanValuestour.com. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Grady, always a pleasure to speak with you, sir.
Thank you. It's great talking with you, Rich.
You bet. God bless you, sir. And amigos, we come back with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. And you sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're going to get to your calls momentarily. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she was on Meet the Press yesterday, and she made it very, very clear that Canada has some work to do.
Canada has some work to do as far as helping us secure our northern border. So we still know we're extremely vulnerable across that northern border, that we have people coming into our country from China, from foreign countries. We have people on the terrorist watch list that come in over our northern border. And in fact, what we have sent a message this week on is that we're not just going to enforce our southern border. We're going to put extra resources at that northern border as well. So Canada needs to come to the table. They need to work with us to make sure that not only can we be good neighbors, but that we can help each other's economies by getting in line and making sure that our immigration policies are followed and that those that are dangerous criminals face consequences.
Dangerous criminals have to face consequences. Canada has work to do. I want to hit the phones on this. We've got another Canadian listening on WVMT out of Vermont. Peter calling us from Montreal. Peter, go right ahead.
Yes, good evening, Rick. Great to talk to you. Listen to you a lot.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, it was interesting. You were talking before about how did Justin Trudeau ever get elected? And I realize you have an American audience. I don't want to bore you with Canadian politics, but there's an interesting story here. You know, as the previous caller said, you know, his party, the Liberal Party of Canada, left wing, was decimated. And they got this guy with a family named Trudeau. All he had was a bachelor's of arts degree and a bachelor of education degree, a trust fund baby. And they tried the Kennedy approach. You know, they wanted to, let's create someone who's a rock star. And they, you know, the Liberals call it the big red machine, not red as in the U.S.
Red as in commies?
Red is left. And long story short, you know, they took this guy who was a third-rate drama teacher at a girls' high school, private, family name.
Sounds about right.
Snowboarder kind of guy. They selected him, they groomed him, they coached him, they directed him. And so basically we had this young actor in the Prime Minister's office they the bidding of all the backroom boys and girls in the Liberal Party of Canada, the big red machine. So he was answerable to them, and they were more or less answerable to the globalists who are everywhere in this world, unfortunately, pulling a lot of strings. And I don't want to bore the audience. I'm just going to get quick. But long story short, they take this guy, they create him, they do the optics, and in Canada, the second part of the equation is the media. We have an establishment, you know, kind of left-leaning media. We have a state broadcaster, the CBC, Canadian broadcast. And basically, to cut to the chase, they gave Trudeau a free ride for the longest time because our fake news, you know, so much of what happens in the States, this is great being a Canadian because we see what happens in the States, we see what happens in the UK. We're just sort of the junior kid watching all this. And we see patterns. I've seen patterns, you know, and so you realize how big this whole game has been, you know, over the last decade or so, you know, with Biden, Harris.
Sure.
You know,
they
all
prop
the
up these people
DCIs,
that can't otherwise, right? And the media kind of puts them in a position of looking like they know what they're doing. They toss them all these softball questions. They help them out as best they can, and they make it look like they're semi-competent. And then they drop the hammer on you when they actually have to govern.
That's right. And, you know, there was so much exclusion of the opposition, the Conservative Party of Canada, which is now really doing very well in the polls. Seems Canadians have, you know, awakened after 9 years. And following, you know, this great turnaround in the United States, whereas a lot of people, you know, they you know, God bless you, America, so many of you said, no, we're not going to believe this BS ongoing all the time. We're going to think for ourselves. And look at the great result that President Trump garnered, you know, popular vote, the states, the swing states, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, you know, here's an interesting little parallel, I think, that makes the point very well. Remember Kamala, as you like to call her?
Yes,
I love
Kamala Harris, yes. Glad she's gone.
In the last campaign, what was she doing? She was bubbly and happy, joy. They'd ask her a serious question, and she'd say, well, I just want to be happy for all the people. It's almost as though she's playing off this, don't think, don't be a critical thinker, don't answer the question. Joy was a buzzword. When Trudeau got elected, Justin Trudeau in Canada back in 2015 for the first time, he did the exact same thing. They marketed happiness. Sunny ways was the catchphrase. Sunny ways in Canada, joy with Kamala. And so you put it together, and you just see this pattern. So what do all these shrewd backroom organizers, PR people know? They know that by and large there's so many of us out there who just don't listen, we don't understand, we don't think critically.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
too busy trying to pay your bills.
I saw on November 5th was a huge turnaround. The United States, and you were talking before about the Sovereignty Wealth Fund. Rick, it's been, 7 days?
Right. It really has been. And, Peter, it's very interesting that all this is happening in this first week, 10 days or so, that I think people are overlooking a lot of it, right? They're missing a lot of it. But you're right, this Sovereign Wealth Fund could be a huge game changer. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, and I'm willing to hear more about it. Thanks for the lesson. I really did appreciate the juxtapositions between Canadian politics and American politics, and I'm grateful to have folks in Canada that are tuning into the program and that they're finding benefit in this national conversation as well. Thanks, brother, and a shout out to WVMT out of Vermont with their big signal that carries into Canada. And let me see, I guess, we could continue here. Let's go to my friend Paul. Paul is in Boise, Idaho on KBOI. Paul, go right ahead, sir. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah. I just first of all, I wanted to say, your show is not only thought-provoking, but it's
Paul, did I lose you? Go right ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say thought-provoking and informative and entertaining, all three.
Oh, thank
you. Where are you going to find a show like that? But I find it on your radio program, and I've been listening to it almost religiously, if there is such a thing as religious radio listening. And
it's very kind.
I do. It's a better form of entertainment than TV because I have to use my own imagination.
Yeah, theater of the mind, they call it. Well, I appreciate that. Now, tell me about the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund and your thoughts on it.
I thought that it could be used to do a 2.0 Abraham Accords, to send some of the money towards that to help it get off the ground and the amount of money that it takes to put on something like that.
Now, when you say that, do you mean like in terms of creating peace or in how big of an idea it is?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's not going to be a simple task. It's going to probably take all 4 years of numero uno's work at it. But he's got a lot of able people that are working on everything.
I'm glad you said that. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to make take a moment to pay a compliment to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I got to tell you, he's kicking butt, right? Marco Rubio's out there and he's doing his thing. Trump definitely picked the right guy for the job, Paul.
Yeah, he did. I agree 100%.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for the call. I'm going to take a pause right here. And maybe you're right. Maybe the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund will be what gets President El Trompito Donaldus Magnus the Nobel Peace Prize this time around. Last time he was nominated for the Abraham Accords. Maybe this could be it. You may be onto something, Paul. Folks, we're coming right back. Shout out to KBOI. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And you know what? The Grammy Awards was last night. I had no idea. And unlike many of my conservative counterparts, I actually like the Grammys. I love watching those performances, not when they get crazy and demonic and kind of weird. That I don't like, but you know my stance on these things. Look, I don't like Robert De Niro's politics, but I'll watch a Robert De Niro movie and laugh my butt off. He's great. I grew up watching him. And, you know, I don't really have to like you to appreciate your art. No, I get you're allowed to disagree with me on that and say, no, I don't like him. I'm not supporting him. That's fine. That's okay. The stuff that I like, I would have nothing to listen to, you know, if I had to base it off of, do I agree with their politics or their faith or whatever it is. So, you know, I make those decisions accordingly on a case by case basis, I would suppose. But what's interesting is, you know, a couple of years ago, more than a couple, maybe in 2018, the Grammys came to New York City, right to my building. Right, we were work at the time, 17 floors above Madison Square Garden, and the Grammys were there. No, that was a couple of years earlier. That year they did them at Radio City. Or no, was it the Garden? Yeah, it was at the Garden. And anyway, anywho, as they say, I had a party. Right, there was a bunch of other radio stations along with the radio station that I was on, the talk radio station in the city, WABC Radio. But there was also a music station back then. It was called Power 95, WPLJ. It played popular music. There was also a urban station that played like hip hop and R&B, WNBM, which was 105.9, great signal. And anyway, so you know, I got together with some of them, and I had a party, and we had some great stuff going on. Some live rap performances from the legendary Grammy winner, Tretch from Naughty by Nature. You down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. Shout out to my buddy Tretch. And it was really, it was a really good party. We donated some money that we raised to the VH1 Save the Music Foundation. I gave some money away to, they give money away to local schools that are trying to help kids learn about music. And I supported that, A, because I like music, but B, because music education has been proven to increase a child's brain power, and makes all the sense in the world. Find me one of these kids that's a stellar performer in math, science, you know, tech, engineering, math, that type of stuff, STEM areas, and those kids all like play violin or some other instrument, so piano, that type of thing. So there's a direct correlation to music education and one's brain computing power, if you will. Anyway. So I do enjoy the Grammys, but I had no idea. And you know why? Because the Grammys have really fallen off. They really have. They're just not what they used to be. And why? Because they got infected with wokeism and DEI. Now, it doesn't mean I got to boycott them. I wasn't boycotting. I literally didn't know until today, which is bad on them, right? You got to do a better job announcing this. Now, somebody who, again, I'm a fan, Alicia Keys. She's got one of the best songs ever about New York with Jay-Z. Alicia Keys was on stage yesterday, and she decided to talk about DEI. Now, normally, I would never talk about Alicia Keys. I respect her. I think she's terrific. I think she's beautiful. I think she's an amazing artist. And I think she lives, you know, I don't know, like 20 minutes from me. I met her sister at a party once. Lovely person. But what I'm going to say is, I don't know that I agree with what she said on the stage. Listen to this.
This is not the time to shut down the diversity of voices. We've seen on this stage talented, hardworking people from different backgrounds with different points of view, and it changes the game. DEI is not a threat, it's a gift. And the more voices, the more powerful the sound. When destructive forces try to burn us down, we rise from the ashes like a phoenix.
Listen, I think I agree with most of what she's saying here, because I think this is being misunderstood, right? I don't think Alicia Keys is saying that, well, I would suspect, right? I don't think Alicia Keys thinks that Republicans or conservatives or even the Trump administration is trying to shut down the diversity of voices. I think unless she's misunderstanding it. I think we're actually trying to increase the diversity of voices, right? I think to really allow diverse voices in anything is to allow everyone to compete, right? And she knows that more than most. I think the first person to be offended if somebody were to tell Alicia Keys that she is a success today because she is a woman of color, I think she'd take exception to that. I think she would be the first one to tell you. And again, I don't know her, but I would imagine that she would respond with something like, "No, I'm not a success because I'm a woman of color. I'm a success in spite of the fact that I'm a woman of color. I'm a success because I'm talented. B, I'm a successful entrepreneur in the music business. I work very hard, and I've achieved a high degree of success." And I think she'd be right on all of those things. So she succeeds despite DEI, not because of DEI. And I think that's where this might be misunderstood. Because ultimately, the statement, and there was another statement about, this is about the benefactors and those that benefit from it. I think in this instance, she's the benefactor. She is the one that is bestowing her talent upon us. And we benefit from hearing such talent, such great music. So I think we're not that far apart on this. I think Alicia probably agrees with me and you a lot more than she agrees with DEI, just based on the words in the clip here. But I could be wrong on that. Anyway, I'm going to take a pause right here. We're coming right back. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, it is the speed round, which means it's going to be a lot shorter than a regular conversation on the radio. Let's go to Bob in Bloomington, Indiana, WIBQ. Bob, very quickly, what's on your mind?
Senor Rich Valdez. Hey, about the SSI payments or whatever, I'm currently receiving those benefits, and I'm not... I can't live anywhere. It's a pathetic joke.
Well, listen, I agree with you, brother. I'll tell you this. Look, a perfect system, it is not. It definitely is not enough for anybody to live off of. And I know it's supplemental income, right? But I guess there's a presumption that you have some other income, but it definitely doesn't replace an income. And it's a social safety net. I don't know how much it offers for much people, $500, $600, $700, that type of thing. Definitely not enough, and it makes it difficult for many. I don't have the answer on that one. I think it probably should go up at some point, but I don't know that it can. Bob in Bloomington, thank you, WIBQ. Steve in Keokuk, Iowa. I can't get to you right now, KOKX, because we just took a call on the same topic, but I agree. A lot of people are getting shafted by SSI. Maybe it's something we could dig into more on this show. Richard in Wilmington, North Carolina, WAAV, 14th Amendment. I'm not sure we're going to have enough time to unpack that one here, but thank you. Brody in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Tariffs and Trump coming back to the USA. You know what? I'm going to have to owe you that one, all of you guys, because the music means I got to go. The speed round is over. And Brian in Brunswick, Maine, WLOB. Biden owes $10 million in taxes. Can it be charged? You bet he can. Will they charge him? I doubt it. Might get a fine, though. Folks, hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.